What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are live, and today we are joined by Khan, and we're going to be talking all about what it is to be a leader in an AC kingdom, what it is to have been playing Rise of Kingdoms for this long, and we're going to be learning all about him. Stick around to find out. What is up, Khan? Say hello to everyone. I'm sure they're pumped to meet you.
Hey guys, good to see you all here. Hope everything's going well with all of you.
Oh yeah. Well, Khan, this has been a long time coming. I think I joined 1079 how long ago now?
It'd be about 5 KVKs, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. It's been a long time. And for the record, I was here before Gaines.
That is true. You were our first streamer in 79.
That's right. Took a little hiatus, but it's okay. No one needs to remember that. I'm back now.
Yeah, no, that's good to have you, man.
Thank you. So how long have you been in 1079?
So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. I technically been in 79 since the first day of 79 on my original account, but this particular account I've been back here since KVK 4, about 4 years ago.
Wow. So you started in 1079 and then what happened? You left?
Yeah. So I started originally in 1079 on my first account, which is actually one of my farms now. Didn't really start it off right, like a lot of new players didn't know like the correct way to do it, wasted a lot of gold heads, upgraded stuff wrong. So I joined a jumper group and actually went to K126 where I was king there for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And then my friend who is king of 79 asked me to come back, so that's why I came back.
Wow. So when you started your new account, did you fix all the mistakes that you made the first time, or did you still make some boo-boos?
I fixed all the mistakes I made the first time that existed back then. Obviously, a lot of game content's come out since then that I had to learn, but I at least didn't make my Minamoto like 1542. So.
Oh God. Not that it matters, because you maxed him anyways, right?
Yeah, exactly. It worked out in the end.
So if you started in 1079, that means that your account is older than mine, and mine is old as dirt.
Yeah, we're both kind of fossils. We've been around quite a bit.
Oh man. So when you started, because people always tell me like, no, Shappy, you're crazy. When you started, was there even KVK? Had they even introduced that yet?
No, so KVK did not exist in 79. My friend who was the king before me, he was kind of a visionary in that regards and like felt that it would go to a KVK because he played similar games. He tried to build 79 for a kingdom made for KVK, and that's actually why a lot of people left, because like we didn't do a lot of war within the kingdom, and without KVK, the only thing to do was alliance versus alliance and fight for the Lost Temple.
Wow. So you guys figured it out early. And that's interesting, because if you did go the old route of like having alliance versus alliance for the Lost Temple, I feel like that actually caused a lot more problems later on as the kingdom would try to grow.
It definitely did. That's why, I mean, if you look at the really, really old kingdoms, the only ones still playing at the top tier are obviously 93, who's like the number one kingdom in the game, and 79. I mean, there are other active kingdoms within the first 100, but no one else really in that A tier consistently.
Right. I mean, 1017 is the only other old kingdom that I even know of that's still really active. And I think at this point, they're probably B. But that's wild. That's so crazy. I remember when I was looking for a kingdom to join, I found 1079 just because I was looking for a solid A-tier kingdom with good leadership. And of course, you were here. But I didn't actually know anyone. And that was what was wild for me, is I was looking for a kingdom. I was like, okay, I need a kingdom that's an A tier. Also, shout out to Rai. Thank you, Ryan, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. So I was looking for a kingdom and I was trying to figure out like, okay, what is important in a kingdom? You need good leadership, you need activity, and you don't need dead weight. And when I first came over, 1079 was way bigger. Like I want to say we had 4 alliances. Is
Yeah, we
that
had
right,
four when
Con?
we came over. Yep.
And so why do you think we downsized? Because I feel like you had input in that.
For sure. So, I mean, I think a lot of it was probably that the game has changed in a lot of regards on how matchmaking and all that worked. So, 79, when you first came in, was based on the old principle of only top 300 kind of matter for Imperium matchmaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, we tried to sort of game the system a little bit. Our top two alliances were our top 300. And then we had two like support alliances that pretty much skated under the radar but tried to get extra population in.
Right.
Which worked really well, but then when Lilith kind of just sprung in on everyone that every City Hall level 25 matters, that put us in those crazy KVKs with top like 5 kingdoms in the game, whose top 300 is about 4 or 5 billion ahead of us. So at that time, there was a co-king with myself in 79 who's no longer in 79. And we kind of had a little different ideas, but it was more the concept of I sort of brought it up to him that, I think we do need to downsize them pretty rapidly because all of these accounts that we use as fillers and they're all free to plays that were beneficial are now putting us in like 307 and 34 back when those were like respectable kingdoms as opposed to now when they're pretty much dead.
Which was rough.
Yes.
That
sure.
matchmaking was rough. I think I came in and we were immediately in Imperium KVKs, which was good for content, but bad for Shappy's account.
I'd say it's bad for pretty much everyone's account. Some of us just spent to make our accounts okay again, but yeah.
So on that note, I did have your account here, but let me see right now. I think you are, let's see, you're number 3 in kills, and you are, game's loading and taking forever, of course. I think you're probably, what, top 25 in power?
In 79, you mean?
Yeah, in 79.
Yeah, I usually sit somewhere around 11 or 12 in power.
Okay, so you are a perfect example of, I made a video the other day talking about how like players that are valuable tend to be lower in power rank than they are in kills, right? Because you want your killers to be lower power. So when you do go into matchmaking, that's the ideal, is everyone has power equivalent to their kills. And I feel like one of the things that 1079 does really well, perhaps to my own dismay, is we've really kept our power lean compared to our number of kills.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Kind of all the things you said, that video, I would definitely agree that that is sort of people you want to look for. And that 79 specifically, we kind of artificially manufacture that. And fortunately, we have a kingdom that all kind of agrees with that mentality.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like we rarely have rogues. Like when we talk about MGE or things like that, like even though we are pretty lean and there are power caps, which are fairly stringent, we have not really had very many rule breakers, especially as we talk about like within the scope of, oh, I didn't want to lower my power, so here I am.
Yeah, and that's an issue that I think a lot of kingdoms do struggle with, young kingdoms more than older kingdoms. But at the end of the day, good ways to minimize rogues are just being very upfront and consistent. So, I mean, it's not like we just said there are power caps and deal with it. We gave people notice. And then the first KVK that we had power caps, we introduced something that now we just do every offseason because it works. Which is very clear that if you don't, make it to where you want to be and your power cap's too low, you are free to migrate. We will supply passports, no questions asked, which is kind of an area that some kingdoms fall. They're just like, hey, I'm going to charge X amount of resources and have to pay it. But that creates that bad will where maybe, that leech who like was a dead weight only has 20 million resource. Do you want to keep a guy until he farms you a billion resource when he's just going to kill your farm to do it? Or do you just want to send him on the way and fix your matchmaking?
Right. And I think that's one problem I see a lot of people fall into. Is like, oh no, we don't want to let him go. We don't want to give him passports. And when you then hold on to the passports, it's like, okay, well, you've not really given me much of a choice. So here you go. So I think we've done a really good job of that in 1079. And I think a lot of that is due to you. So, kind of what have been your big learnings as a leader? You've been a leader since the dawn of 1079. You've been a king most of the time, which is really unusual. I feel like the only remaining like long-lived kings are probably Zuck in 1017. Leopard just quit, and he was one of the long ones. What others do you know of?
So at this point, probably the only other really, really old running kings are Ozai in 77. He's been doing it, I think, one KVK less than me, or basically about the same amount of time. We both been at the start. Zuck that you mentioned. Outside of that, Save in 365 has been a king for a while, not as long. But really outside of that, you're getting a lot of younger kings. I mean, there are like people who were kings and now they're kings again. But consistently through, like, very few have kind of been glutton for punishments and doing it for 4+ years.
Yeah, that's wild. And I started in 1304, and I was king for, in between. It was always a rotating king, which I thought was nice. But like, even doing it for like a week or so, that's crazy. Like, there's a lot of pressure, especially when it comes to like, oh, we don't have title managers on. Can you come and get someone to deal with that? It like, just the nuances, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I will say that one thing I did kind of, learn from that too, as you've sort of pointed out, is it really is important to have a good system around you as well. Because when I first was a king, I worked a lot more than I do now, but delegation was kind of one of the things that I learned along the way. It is a team sport in a way. You got to find what people are good at, what they want to do. And really, an ideal king situation is just you're kind of like the resolution solver. If there's problems between other people, you kind of like help mediate it. But if you just have to be involved with literally everything, one, you're micromanaging so no one else ever grows, and two, you're just putting so much work on yourself that you become that, young king from 2500 or 2600 or whatever. Like, oh, I was king for 2 KVKs, it's horrible, I'm never doing it again. Like, they brought that on themselves by not managing.
Yeah, and that's super not sustainable either. I think if you're micromanaging everyone and not delegating to any of your R4, like, it's a full-time job. And
exactly.
You've done a great job. I mean, truly, even with, as you said, you used to have a co-leader. I don't see a co-leader anymore, and I just see a lot of R4 that are really involved. Some of which are in the chat. Cough, cough, cave, I see you.
Yep, looks like they're coming here to either be supportive or troll us. But yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, when my co-leader ended up leaving, it was a discussion of like, hey, do we want another co-leader again? Do we not? And just talking to all the R4s in the kingdom at the time, they're like, we really kind of just appreciate how you're doing things, and we prefer to just have you as the leader and kind of just have the R4s each cover their own territory, which is kind of what we've been doing for about 4 KVKs now.
Yeah. Do you think the downsizing helped with that?
I do think it helped with that. I will also say I think the biggest thing is everyone being on the same page. And that really is kind of like the thing I touched on before. My co-leader and I felt a little differently. It's not that his ideas were wrong or mine were right. You just have to have everyone kind of in a single message. And that is easier to achieve when you downsize. But as long as your entire kingdom is like going in the same direction, whatever direction that is, that's usually the keys to success with a lot of things. So
on that same note, we see a lot of really big kingdoms these days that are kind of dying, right? 1V, 1034, they're essentially, they've lost a lot of people lately. You see 1307. 1307 used to be the gods, and now they're kind of nothing. 2605, I think that goes without saying, maybe a little bit different. But what do you think these kingdoms are doing wrong versus what we're doing right?
For sure. First, I do have to give a shout out in the chat to Cave. He did the no leader question mark and eyes. Cave actually is one of our newer, relatively speaking, R4s. He's only been here for a few KVKs, but he really stepped up, especially when my co-leader did leave, and has helped manage a ton of things. So I do appreciate him. See, Bear, I'm not going to give you a shout out to you. I'm sorry, man. It's not going to work. But to answer your question, Chappie, I think the big difference is what people are playing the game for. And a lot of that really is like trying to build a kingdom identity, which I think some of those that were stronger than us didn't fully do. Is, a lot of people look at kingdoms like 93 or 960, and they're like, I want to be like them. Mm-hmm. And that's all well and good because it works great for them, but to be like 960, it requires having 100 plus players who all max tech, spend a ton of money, get pilots, do all that, which most people can't do. To be like 93, it involves having 500 plus players who are all very active, very coordinated, work really well together, and are very selfless. Most people don't do. So if you try and be like one of them, you're kind of destined to fail, which is a lot like what 365, 307, 34 did. They tried to mold it that way. They tried to bring in the second tier level of players because the first tier were already in 93 or 960. And so when they lost, it kind of, a lot of egos were coming together, thought they made a super kingdom and didn't really work. Whereas 79, we're kind of built on the, we want to have a good time. We want to always have the best fight available. That's why we fought the number one kingdom in ROK 4 different times. We lost 3
Shameless
to 4.
plug.
We won 1 of the... Yeah, exactly. But, despite us losing at this point 5 or 6 KVKs, like we've won more than we've lost, but we've lost quite a bit. We don't collapse after a loss because people are fine when they fight. So it's really about kingdom identity. And I think 307 and 34, their kingdom identity was trying to imitate a better kingdom, and they just couldn't live up to that.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think the other thing is, in our kingdom, I feel like we fit in this really interesting spot when it comes to spending, because we have the right spenders, right? You're a rally lead. And then we have, I want to say between 10 and 15 other rally leads and garrisons in the kingdom. And everyone else is kind of a field fighter. And I think what's interesting is in some of these other kingdoms, right? Like 1960 is a perfect example. Everyone can be a rally lead, and sometimes that's not the best thing.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, especially, if you take 960's example they just mentioned, they all definitely have the tech for it. Almost all of them have the gear for it. They definitely, if you put them in another kingdom, would be a great rally lead. But there's only so many gold heads to go around. There's only so many MGs to go around. There's only so many people that you're really comfortable joining. It's the intangibles. Like, we have a few other people in 79 who probably have comparable gear to myself. But when I set a rally, people are very used to those, and it's just so easy to fill, so easy to reinforce. It's a morale thing. So I do think that's tough there. But I will say, I think 79, like you said, we hit on that we have enough spenders that we can compete with people. But we also are fully filled out with a lot of the low tier, mid tier spenders. That's kind of what 79 is made of.
Yeah, which I think has been nice because we spend during KVK, and then after that, things are pretty okay. Also, I'm curious if anyone in the chat who's in 1079 would not join a con rally, because I know for me, I'm sending my main and about all of my farms if I can.
Now we'll see how much the R4s want to troll us. But yeah, no, it really is something that's always amazing where, I see how well things are filled. I have to be trying to get a negative report, and a lot of that really is on, the behalf of 79, who just will do everything in their power to make that rally successful. And that cohesion that we have is really rare, and there aren't many kingdoms that have that and can punch above their weight because everyone's working together.
Oh, yeah. So on that, do you think that we're going to be recruiting after this KVK? Is that something you think, or do you think we're going to stick to a smaller kingdom size?
No, I think that's a good question. So I think 79 is one of the, kingdoms where we're always going to be recruiting to some degree. I don't think our goal is to get bigger per se. At the same time, usually how it works is just we've built this really strong community, which is awesome. But also time does go on. A lot of us have been playing 5+ years. So very few people leave 79 because they want to go elsewhere. But we do have quite a few who just it's their time and they'll go all out in KVK and then just quit. That's completely understandable. So we always want to be able to keep, turning that over, keep getting new quality, getting new people to join into our kind of group and community. So if there are people who are interested in that mentality, by all means, feel free to let us know. We're happy to have you. The only thing I will say is everyone in 79 does their part. And as you hinted on earlier with our power caps, it really is you get what you put in. If you fight like the 130th best player, your power is going to be 130 in the kingdom. So, we've had several like pretty good high power players before, but they weren't as good as their power. And some of them have had to migrate recently because they just weren't living up to it, and they didn't want to delete a bunch of power, understandably. So we only want people who kind of share in the vision of like, I work with the team and I succeed and kind of fall with the team.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I think the culture that we built here is really nice. And so we don't want to disrupt that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing is what always surprises me is how few people we have over like, I want to say 105 million power. Like it's really, really scarce. I'm looking through, I think it's probably like just Kate and maybe Cave when he's really bloated. But like, that's it. And I know you train a bunch right before KVK, but even then, like, we're not bringing in whales, even if we're bringing in people.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's because, when it comes to whales, there's a few categories. You get the whales like Mahote or Leopard or something like that who are just like true whales. Those aren't a dime a dozen. Like, you know them by their name, you know what kingdom they're a part of. Then there's that next tier of whale that's like not really a whale in the same regard. They're really high powered. They might even be a good player, but usually their maintenance, so to speak, like their requirements to have them kind of outweigh their benefits on the field. And I've found that more often than not, I'll kind of strike gold with people between 80 and 100 million power, which is also why when I made the kingdom power caps, I looked at kind of where the Imperium border was. We always want to sit about 1 billion below there.
Right.
Until pre-KVK, then we're trading Imperium, and everyone will call us Imperium, and it'll be like, yeah, sure, but we're never Imperium off-season. But when I did that, I kind of set the power scale, and I'm like, we don't need 110, we don't need 120 million power players. We don't have players like that. But if you get a lot more people being able to be 70 million plus, 75 million plus, that lets everyone be able to field 5 marches. Right. You have a better fighting capacity than having a bunch of 120 million guys than a bunch of 60 million players.
So for the record, Con, who told me to downsize to 4 marches instead of running 5?
That probably me. I also was the one who told you to use tier 4, and you know what you did, and you did better.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, it's been a little painful, but this KVK has been really nice. And for those that haven't seen the map, here is kind of what we're working with here. You'll notice that this is not a Mega Imperium KVK. In fact, 1079 and 365 primary are the only ones that are Imperium here. So, Con, do we want to be Imperium, or like, what's the deal with that?
No, for sure. And, I think the answer to that might potentially change in the future because Imperium border keeps dropping. We don't have any goals of being Imperium. At the same time, we're not scared of it. Like right now, we are on and off Imperium depending on the day. I think yesterday we were and weren't. Haven't checked. We might be now for all I know.
We are.
We are. Yes, yeah, we're back to Imperium. We're right on that edge. To me, I don't care if we're Imperium or not. I care if we're fighting to our abilities. So if we're Imperium, I want to be able to confidently say, you can put us against half the Imperiums and we'll beat them in a fight. If I can't make that statement, we have no business being Imperium. And that's kind of what's made us not be Imperium every off-season. And we hit Imperium during KVK. We're kind of in that sweet spot where we can fight a good number of Imperium kingdoms. We can fight like any non-Imperium except for 188, in a one-on-one, basically. Right. So we're kind of in that spot right now. But, if we get a recruitment wave, if we get 30 great fighters who like actually earn that power and we hit Imperium, I'm not scared of it, but also I'm not going to take in people just so we can hit Imperium.
Right. And I think that goes back to kind of what you were saying earlier about the fact that, we're not actively out there recruiting, like trying to hustle people, which I think makes it a little bit easier because if we don't need mega whales to come in, then staying within our Imperium power cap or just below it is really not so hard.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, we put in the caps, and once we did that and just natural, turnover of some people quitting, things like that, the 2 or 3 just randomly migrate every off season, we've been able to comfortably, like in off seasons, do whatever we want, don't hit Imperium. And it's literally when we say let's train a bunch of troops because we're going to kill them in a war that we hit Imperium. So we're in a pretty self-regulating spot, like you just pointed out.
Oh yeah. And if we don't kill them in war, then we have to delete them, or we have to do the siege trick, which if no one has seen that video, that's a nice one to get some speed ups.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely will say, Tappy's not just saying that for clickbait. For anyone who is following, definitely do that. That's a better route than just getting rid of your troops. I never did the trick for that reason, because I've always killed my troops in war, but I did have one of my farms artificially do something like that, we'll call it, and they got a ton of speed ups back. So I will say it is definitely helpful to do.
Awesome. So Con, we've gone through none of the questions that I told you that I was going to ask you, and you've been a great sport. So let's actually dive into a couple that I actually sent you in advance.
Okay.
So the first one was actually about different KVK modes, because we've played a bunch now. We've played Tides. We've played, I think it was Orleans. You've obviously played all the old ones, 1, 2, Light versus Dark, Standard Heroic Anthem. We've played Strife. What is your, favorite KVK mode, and do you think there is a perfect KVK mode?
For sure. So I will say, I think it's kind of a 2-part question. My favorite KVK mode was KVK 2, and it's not for the reason that everyone jumps back to Young Kingdoms, because I've literally never done that. I've stayed in 79. It's because back then they didn't have Crystal Tech, and that really did. I mean, I say this as a spender who maxes Crystal Tech, so I'm benefiting from Crystal Tech, but having so many people able to fight on a level playing field motivated the population of players, so it made them more interested in fighting. So I'd say, in an idealistic world, KVK 2. In Season of Conquest, which is kind of everything we have to work with, I appreciate pretty much all the game modes. I actually think Lilith has done a good job in that regards. A lot of things I do have complaints on, but KVK mode and variety is not one of them. I actually really liked the stratagems one, personally.
Okay.
I kind of like how there's the different tactics involved there. You can use the artifact where you're changing around your troop types. Cool thing going on there. I know they've been adding that in some of the new ones, and I am excited to try the new ones when they come out as well. But I really do think that that's probably my favorite one currently. We'll see. I'd like to give Orleans a chance again in the future, but that's the one thing that 79 won't let me do, because that was where we fought 34. They just won't let me sign up for Orleans again, even though I think the KVK format has potential.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think they've done a really good job of kind of fleshing out the KVK types, and I'm scrolling through the list right now. I didn't actually realize how many they have now, right? There's Heroic Anthem, there's Strife, there's Desert Conquest, King of the Nile, Orleans, Warriors Unbound, Storm of Stratagem, and then Tides. They have what is that, 6? 8 different KVKs that are all Crystal Tech, which is wild to me. Now here's the fun question. You max Crystal Tech every KVK. Yep. If there was a KVK without Crystal Tech, would you still pick a Crystal Tech KVK?
No. So, and like I said, it's not for my account personally, because I trade better, because I always have the max and I'm fighting lower than me. But I will say, I've had so many friends that don't spend, and obviously, like I said, 79 has enough low spenders free to play that for me, if I could offer that to someone, I 100% would, even if I didn't like the KVK format as much either, because I truly do believe that's where we start losing population in Rise of Kingdoms. I know Lilith doesn't actually listen to these suggestions, but if they made a non-Crystal Tech KVK, I think they'd be shocked at how many people they'd get back into the game.
For fun, how do you think they would get you to spend money in that game mode?
No, and that's the thing. If they were smart about it, if you look at the revenue that the game made, it was more before Crystal Tech came in.
Really?
I mean, I was spending as much or more before Crystal Tech. I just would buy bundles that actually gave me better speed up, so I'd be excited to spend the money because I'm actually getting a tangible result, as opposed to Crystal Tech. I get it until I'm maxed, more or less, but then I don't continue buying that bundle because it's useless. And
Right.
I do sometimes like over factor how much Crystal Tech is, so I don't buy some bundles I would, and then I'm like, oh, Crystal Tech wasn't as expensive as I thought, and then a few $100 every KVK that I'm not spending because Crystal Tech.
Right. Well, I think the other thing to consider is Crystal Tech is maybe, I don't know, probably around 400 and something bucks to max. If they got a bunch more players just playing the game again, that they'd still be getting that revenue. It would just be from people buying, the monthly gem supply, things like that, where you're coming in and you're spending on the game just to spend on the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I used to know a ton of players that, and I mean, it seems kind of funny, to people outside the game, but those inside who know it, that they're like, hey, I have a $20 or $50 a month budget, and that's what they did. They loved the game, and they would do it because when Crystal Tech wasn't a factor, you could choose your one niche role, like, I'm going to be a rally lead of this one unit type, or garrison lead of this one unit type, or a really good field fighter, and they can do it. And I think people forget that, in the original KVKs before Season of Conquest, free-to-play players could be garrison rally lead.
I used to be a rally lead, Con. That's why I have Gilgamesh maxed and Flavius and all those great commanders.
Yeah, so no, I think they would definitely get the revenue in. I mean, I don't think they're going to listen to that, but I do think if they did, they'd be surprised that they'd get more money and more involvement again.
Yeah. Now, at this point, and this isn't scripted as a question at all, but do you think that free-to-play should be trying to be rally and garrison leads at this point?
At this point in the game, with how it currently stands, no. I think it's a way to waste your account. I will say that as a high spender who set up his account to do that, I still have a quote-unquote worse account than people who have spent similar amounts of money to me because I focus on rally and garrison. So if you're a free-to-play and you focus on that, you're going to get so much worse trades in the field. You're not going to have good field marches. It's not a good setup, because usually the best rally commanders or garrison commanders are not the ones that are getting you good value on the field.
Right. And that makes sense. I mean, it was funny. I made a bunch of videos talking about like the most tankiest marches, and Henry is one of them. But what's wild is if you actually look at his skills, his counterattack damage only kicks in if he's rallying.
Yep, exactly.
So it's a little bit of a struggle, but I totally understand. As a leader though, do you think you have to be a rally and garrison lead, or do you see leaders that, are just field fighters?
So I will say I have seen many kingdoms where the leader is not a rally or garrison lead. I will say there's kind of two tiers where that kind of occurs. Really, really poor kingdoms, like less idealistic ones, less quality kingdoms, their leaders don't do that. You kind of get to that mid-tier where pretty much every mid-tier kingdom, the king can do it or does do it. And then when you get to the really, really high tier again, then it's kind of a flip of a coin if they do or not. Like 93 is an example. Like Nyko, who does a lot of their stuff, great person. I have a lot of respect for them. They're not going to rally or garrison anything ever.
Right.
But I mean, I'm not going to go and say we can fight 93 because we can't. We'll get our face kicked in repeatedly. So,
I would like
or
to
even
fight with them.
Yeah, exactly. Or like 960s is an example. Like Leopard's account was insane. He did so much before he quit XYZ. Leopard was very rarely sending those rallies and garrisons. Usually it was other people. Just because, and I mean, he was the king, but he was like focusing on controlling the field, doing things like that. So I don't think you need to, but I think a lot of kingdoms, it does default to the king doing that.
Yeah. Now, how much field fighting do you feel you can actually do as the king? Because I know a lot of the time you're trying to coordinate people. You're trying to make sure that you're not getting pinched on the sides with territory. You're also trying to drop markers and use king skill. Like, does that kind of add a handicap to your fighting?
It definitely does. And it also depends on how well you multitask. We had a previous officer who was really good and helped with a lot of things, but she always had a concern that when she was in leadership, her KVK stats were worse, and she was very public about complaining about that. So, at one point she was just ranting so much. I'm like, okay, fine, do a KVK without leadership. I don't care. Like, just go for it. And her stats were better, and I mean, it was like notably better because all you focus on was doing that. So that was even as an R4 responsible things. As a king, you have so much more you have to do. And early on in ROK, that affected me a lot, and it was a lot harder. Now I've gotten to the point where like I'm able to kind of multitask with it enough that it's pretty marginal, the loss that I have. The main loss is my best set of gears on my rally pair. But if you just subtract one field march, that's basically the gap I'm missing now.
Right. And how many gems every KVK do you think you spend on just King skill?
Probably between 1 and 200,000.
Oh my god. I'm sitting here with 47,000 gems right now, and that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, literally the altar we had a few days ago, I think during that altar I dropped at least 10,000 gems in just the altar.
Wow. That's... Well, it's much appreciated because I did pretty well during altar, but that's expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so now I'll go back to some of the other questions. One I didn't actually get to on KVK. What is something you would change actually just about the KVK format, about the KVK experience? You mentioned you preferred KVK 2. What would you change about the existing ones beyond Crystal Tech?
For sure. So beyond Crystal Tech, I think there are a lot of components there that could be fixed. The biggest one I would try and fix, I know everyone says it and they're like, oh, but there's no actual solution, but there 100% could be, is I would try and fix how matchmaking works. I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the side where we've been like completely overpowered compared to our opponents. I've been on the other side when like I don't know how we were put in the same KVK as other people, like referencing that 34 KVK, things like that. And for an entity that makes as much as Lilith does and has the technology they do, they really can do a better job of matching. And I think that's a big factor that should go in there, and that's how I would probably change KVKs. If we had closer fights, I do think it'd be a lot more fun, and I think the game would still be a bit bigger. That's why a ton of people go down to C tier kingdoms or B tier kingdoms, hoping to try and get a closer matchup. So I think if they could pair A kingdoms better, I think it'd be a lot better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the matchmaking is painful. I remember I was on a stream, I think it was with Gaines, talking about how the domain system was just such a mistake. Like, there was so much potential, and they totally blew it. Because they needed to establish, I think, minimums on how much power could be considered a second domain, and I don't think they did it. And it just, even in our current KVK, I totally think that led to a lopsided KVK.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely would agree. I mean, the fact that 365's farms are considered the A tier kingdom in their camp, and then they're paired with 504, who, very, very nice people, and we're obviously doing our best and stuff, but like, they're 40 or 50 active guys, and their power was lower than any other kingdom, in this KVK. It clearly was like a 3 camp KVK is what it is. Or, to be generous, maybe a 3.5 camp KVK. But yes, they definitely have dropped the ball a ton with domain systems. I do appreciate how they at least called it Pioneer, and they're like not 100% convinced it'll be in the game. And I suspect that domain systems are going to end up like the whole Alliance versus Alliance KVKs was going to be, which actually never ended up rolling out at all.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think they're going to just like pretend domains never existed, and they're just going to drop off the map and just be like, wait, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Well, so funny thing that I actually saw today, and it was included in my video, which totally bombed, and that's okay, was, did you know that they've changed how the starting provinces and kingdoms actually work?
I did not know that, no.
So now, if you're in preparation season, they've limited it to only 3 zones. So you know how our zone 1, we have 6? They've limited it to only 3.
That is really interesting. Did not know anything about that, to be fair.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. But I think it goes back to the same thing of like, I really hope that they make the change and go back to normal, because that was just such a big mistake.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think they're trying out things to try and see what generates interest and what doesn't. But I think if they stuck to things that worked for them, they could still get some good results.
So on that, why are you still here? Right, Lilith has changed a lot, and there's been a ton that they've added: armaments, equipment, new commanders, new mechanics. Like, what's kept you around?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, that's a really good question. And I tell people when I came to 79 with a group of like probably about 25 to 30 people immediately. And then another like 30 joined me like one KVK later or like a few months later. Of that initial group, I don't really have like any of them left. I still have one who's like in 79, and then one was in that second group of like the 30 that came very, very shortly after. He's one of my R4s and he's great. But yeah, I mean, pretty much my starting community's gone. Everyone that I knew back then has quit the game more or less. A few migrated, but mainly they all quit. It's been so long. Games changed so much. So in my particular case, it really was the community. Reason people quit are a variety of things like, the game isn't, the most fun in the world, or they're spending too much money, or it's too time consuming, XYZ. For me, the money part never really mattered that much. Obviously, I spend quite a bit, but it didn't affect my finances really that much. In my opinion, the gameplay was never like overly amazing. Like it was good, don't get me wrong, but they're never like so amazing. But for me, it's just the people I've been able to meet in this game. It started with that initial group, and I'm very thankful for them. I definitely would have quit if they hadn't come with me to 79. But while they were slowly dropping off, I was meeting new people and building those connections. And 79 is a great place for that. That's why we've been here for 5 years. We all get along really well. We are like that family. So many of us have got new jobs, graduated college, graduated university, had children, got married. I got married.
I got married.
Yeah, exactly. You got married. Like we've all done so many life events, and we've kind of been able to cover for each other. Like if you're busy one KVK, you're gonna like ease off a little bit then, but go really hard next time, and someone else is gonna pick up for you. So it really is a group of people. That's why so many great kingdoms have asked if I'd migrate there. And if we're trying to be objective, they probably would be like quote unquote better than 79 or be able to beat us one on one. But I really couldn't see leaving because the only reason I'm playing is this kingdom. Like if 79 wasn't here, I'd have moved on long ago.
That's awesome. And I think we've created something really, really special in 79. And I'm not going anywhere anytime soon unless I don't make my kills and you chase me out.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think you're at any risk of that, man. I mean, I think you went through the period of time that you couldn't be as active, but now, I mean, looking at all the numbers, you're doing great. I see you active. I see you doing things. I don't think it'll be a problem for you.
Love it. So, as a leader of a kingdom, right? You've done this probably longer than most, and you're still doing it. What are some of the things that you really prioritize, right? What's important to you?
So for me, the things that are most important is kind of something I touched on a little bit before, but sharing the goal of the kingdom and finding individuals who feel that way. Because again, you can go in pretty much any direction, but you really need to go united, and that is huge. So finding people that are about the same type of philosophy as you are the biggest thing for me. And that's always the most important. Once you find that, though, the responsibility as the leader that I find important too is you need to be consistent and you need to be fair. So no matter what it is, I have found that people joke in 79 I'm a dictator, and that's basically because what I say goes. But that is because we've been doing this for so long and I've been so consistent and things along those lines that they know that I am acting in their best interest. And they know in 79 I'm king purely by them wanting me to be. If they asked me to step down, I would. So as long as you're consistent with that, it works. Like the power caps was a good example. We tell people, hey, this is why we're wanting to do it. The game is shrinking. The Imperium border is dropping. We want to stay competitive. We don't want to be fighting 960 and 93 and get murdered because we're free to plays for the majority. This is how we're going to do it. And then we're going to set caps. And it's going to be fair because everyone has an equal chance. If you fight better than person B, you have a higher power cap. It doesn't matter if they're my R4 or an R1. So as long as you maintain that integrity, people respond really well.
Yeah, and I think it is very funny to see how well people listen to you versus other people. Like, I'll message in chat, I'll be like, do this, and everyone will be like, go away, Shappy. Even some of the R4 will be like, you're not reading markers. And then you came on, this was literally altered 2 days ago, and you're like, get off their territory. And suddenly, everyone was off their territory.
Yeah, it really is one of those things that I think, sometimes the legend outgrows the person. And I think based on when I first came to 79, it always was, I've held integrity to a very high standard. Like I said, I zeroed my previous romantic partner when I first started ROK because she broke rules. One of my best friends who came to 79, multiple members of my original group quit because I wouldn't give them special treatment. You see enough things like that, and then it's, that legend kind of grows, and people are like, I mean, if you don't listen to Khan, trust me, he's not going to feel bad about, like, either zeroing you, making you migrate, X, Y, Z. Like, if he did it to this person, he's fine doing it there. Right. But they know, as opposed to being just, like, a jerk who doesn't care about them, I'm doing it because I value the kingdom and this is what's best for them. So it's a mix of, like, they know there's repercussion, but also it's like the parent who's not mad but they're disappointed in you.
Yeah.
You want to do it because you want, to, like, make them proud.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, I mean, throughout this process, what are some of the lessons you've learned? Like, have you made any mistakes?
Mistakes with what?
With just leadership, with leading a kingdom, with being that guy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will say 5 years of doing this definitely made some mistakes. No one was perfect. You can hit on a lot of things that could happen. Some issues were there have been times I gave some of my R4s too much leeway or too little. I think the two biggest mistakes, though, that if I could go back, I would redo, because like there are a lot of like mistakes I made, but as part of like just growing and developing, that I'd be a hypocrite saying I'd change them because like I wouldn't kind of gotten here otherwise. The two that I like knew better and still did anyway. A few people in my original group I was biased towards. Now most of them have quit like long ago. But there were a few that, like probably about 4 or 5 KVKs back, I kind of ended up like getting them to quit because I knew I was like being very unfair to how well I treated them versus others. And then sort of peeling off that as well, my co-leader, like I said, realistically our ideals were different, and that's fine. The kingdom, though, was very in line with what I thought as opposed to what he thought. And I think I did not do a service to the kingdom because he was like my best friend, and I didn't want to drive him out of 79. So I think I really should have said, like, personally, he's one of your best friends, but as a king, he is not helping the kingdom. He's making it worse. And if I had cut that cord to maybe 3 or 4 KVKs earlier, we might still have a lot more of the quality people who, like I said, I look at all these young kingdoms now, some really successful, and they're made up of former 79 players. So, like, those would probably have still been here if I'd done that earlier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're always welcome back. I think we're doing a pretty good job. We're about to have a second KVK win under our belt, I hope. So, I think you're doing the right things. So I have no doubt. I'm not going anywhere else. If you were to go to another Kingdom Con, where would you go?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, actually. I have thought about that a lot, and speaking of, like I said, there are multiple areas that are now run by former 79 players, and, that would be enticing. At the end of the day, and it's not for the reason people are thinking, it would either be 93 or 960, and the reason for both those is not because they're the top 2 kingdoms, because trust me, that's actually not overly exciting to me. But it's just so many of the former people I played with in 79 and actually 126, where I was king for a bit too, are there. One of the guys in 960, he's like part of the new leadership. He's not like their new king, but he's part of their new leadership. He was actually in the same alliance with me as 126. So he's been a really big factor there, helping like lead a lot of them. 93 has at least 30 or 40 people from my old kingdom, mix of 79 and 126. So it's just, that is where the largest group of my former friends and like still current friends, but not in 79, are. So it'd be one of those two kingdoms.
That makes sense. I think, I've been transparent. I think if I were to ever go anywhere, it'd be 93 for the same reasons, right? I was in 2120, and all of 2120's power went over to 93. So, that's where my old friends are. Now, Gaines and I have talked about this a little bit, and it cracks me up because I think I talk to him every day. Would you say that you talk to your Rise of Kingdoms friends probably more than even your real life friends sometimes?
Actually, yeah, definitely. I would say it's a little unfair to, classify my wife in that category, but outside of her, 100%. Like, I mean, I talk to my Rise of Kingdom friends a lot more than I talk to my in-person friends. And honestly, that's because I've spent so much time in XYZ in this. In my real life, I've been changing so many things like jobs, moving cities, and all of that I have a much larger continuity with the people on this game. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel the same. And I probably talk to my wife slightly more than I talk to Gaines, but she might disagree with me on that one.
Probably fair.
So you've mentioned that you're a rally leader, and I think it goes without saying, looking at your account, even from an objective third-party standpoint, you're kind of a badass. What is your favorite troop type? I know there's been some debate. Cave was throwing some shade at you for launching infantry rallies at one point. So I gotta hear from the horse's mouth. What's your favorite troop type?
Definitely. So I do have rallies of all three types, which is what Cave was referencing, including infantry. And that sort of shocked him a bit. But I would say my favorite is Archer, and that's not to be a bandwagon person. It's not because they're currently the best rallies, which they are. It was because, like I said, I've been playing the game for so long, and at the start, everyone at the start was infantry. Everyone had Richard Charles Martel. It was the best March. That was what they wanted to do, XYZ. A lot of people loved Cavs because Miyamoto could literally buy and max him, so he's like the first expertise most people had. Very, very few people saw the benefit of the OG El Cid and also YSG. So, way back then, I actually maxed them. I was, the only person in our 126, actually. We had 3 rally leads. One was infantry, one was cav. I was the archer guy. So, even back then, I was archers. And now it's actually separated that, archers are almost always the best rally lead. Infantry is almost always the best garrison. Mm-hmm. And cavalry really gives you a ton of, field benefit. So they actually did make a triangle. But, even before that, I've always been on the archer train. So, that's kind of a thing for me.
And it's funny because they had a really hard time actually building out that triangle. I feel like for a long time, archers didn't have their place. And it was always weird because in the field, they're not as good. Sorry, hot take. They're not as fast, and then they're not very tanky, just kind of holistically as a unit type. And so it is nice to see that they've kind of found their niche as a rally.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, and so would my hospitals whenever I take negative trades. Archers are definitely not designed for the field, and I'm not trying to sell people on, hype and Kool-Aid. Archers are not by far the best unit, but for rallies, I do think they're the best, and I personally like using those.
So, have you ever maxed an archer commander that you wish you probably didn't?
I think that's tough because obviously a lot of older commanders, you look back and I shouldn't have maxed that. But in real time, I think the only one I kind of felt that way about, Dido. And she's good as a garrison, but just that particular KVK, we didn't really use her just about at all. So by the time I'd use her, she was already outdated. Mm-hmm. And then I would probably also say the same about Cyrus. I used Nebu a ton. He's gotten a ton of usage, Very, very rarely I might even throw him in a march now, just kind of mess around. But Cyrus I never really used much. His only real kind of player use is swarming flags nowadays, but I don't use them for that really because I don't manually switch over to I'm going to swarm a flag versus my field marches. So
right, which makes sense. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you have a favorite archer commander, both by appearance or by use?
Yeah, and they're not the best archer commander, but I would actually say YSG. And the reason I say that is obviously he was an original one. He's still, and a lot of people don't, but I actually personally still keep him in my field march setup. He is the longest running commander that's actually been useful. Charles has done great as well. Guan had a really long time of being meta, but no other commander has been an original commander that is still meta to this day. So I really value
Attila.
that. He was the first. He was the first one to do that circular AOE.
Yeah, that's true. That circular AOE was always really good. I have my screen up right now so people can roast me in the chat about the fact that my YSG is currently 5523.
There you go.
One day, maybe after they replace him.
There you go. I like that.
So speaking of that, what do you think of like new commanders coming up? I've heard that they're potentially going to add smite damage back into the game for Cavs, which Attila is my favorite commander, head and shoulders above everything else, and I think everyone knows that. Do you think that could breathe new life into him and bring back some of these older commanders?
I definitely think it's possible. I actually like smite damage, despite me being the guy who uses the skill damage legendary skin. I like how they are broadening out the game mechanics on fighting, and I do think it could bring some stuff back. Because you probably saw it, recently when there's that KVK with 960 and 93 and 2605 before they died and all of that, where like Attila was being used as a garrison, because if you mix it up with the artifact, you could do like a Gorgo Attila Gorgo, anything like that. So I do think it's adding a new dynamic in there that'll make some older commanders relevant again.
Yeah. Now they just need to give me a museum buff for Attila and I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Once they museum buff Attila, it's game over. It'll be like the old Attila that ran the game for 2 years.
Some people don't remember that, Con. I remember pre-Xeno, Attila was unstoppable.
Attila was the rally, the garrison, and the field commander. There has never been a commander that was as dominant as Attila Takeda was. For a year plus, it was the best at literally everything.
Oh, yeah. And it was smart from Lilith, because they got a bunch of poor schmucks who ended up maxing Woo, because Martel Woo was like the only effective counter. And now, I don't think I've seen anyone use Woo in Lord knows how long.
Yep, exactly. That's kind of how that one worked out.
It's all right. Made Lilith a little bit of money.
It's all that matters to them.
Honestly. I mean, hopefully the player base matters too. We're trying to get sponsored here over on the Shappy channel. We're also trying to hit 3,000 subscribers. I think we're pretty close. Let's see, what are we at? We are at currently, we are currently at 2,985. We're 15 subs away. So if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, be sure to do so. But that sponsorship would be nice, because I'd like to be able to reinvest back into the game and give a little bit back, So
I definitely think you'll be able to hit 3,000 soon. If you don't get it today, I think you'll get it tomorrow. So there you go.
Here's to hoping. Now, one thing that's interesting to me, Con, is you have not one, but 2 Rise of Kingdoms content creators. Actually, it was 3 at one point in 1079. And I feel like Rise of Kingdoms content creators are both a curse and a blessing to a kingdom. Because sometimes you end up with a lot of visibility, which is great. And then other times you end up with a bunch of people who shouldn't be migrating in, and totally butchering the kingdom. So, first off, why did you allow all of us in?
For sure. First, to sidetrack for a second, shout out to Kraft in the comment section asking how he gets titles. Kraft was nice enough to actually make us a bot program that we have used for a lot of titles for a while. So that's been very, very helpful. Outside of that, though, to answer your question, why we sort of let content creators and stuff come in, when it first was being talked about for you specifically, it actually was almost as an afterthought. Like, my former co-leader as well kind of like got you in, and they was like, oh, by the way, we have a content creator coming in. I was like, okay. But like when Gaines ended up wanting to come in as well, to me it was a thing of, I'm a big believer in any publicity is good in a lot of regards. I mean, 79 is built on the reputation of, more than half of the ROK community jokes about us, and they're like, they try and troll us, and they're waiting for us to die in XYZ, and we don't. We have a lot of haters, but we are one of the most well-known kingdoms in the game. We kind of thrive off that. You know, that's our mentality. It actually motivates us to fight more, and we get to laugh when all these people who, like, you know, wish bad on us all end up collapsing. Their kingdoms have, like, all died after we fought them. Kind of funny how that worked. So to get
Isn't it? Are you subtweeting anyone there in particular, Don?
I mean, 34 and 307 aren't looking too good, is all I'm gonna say. So, you know, they liked taking on the fact that they challenged a kingdom 5 billion power lower than them, and then was proud of that fact. That's like if we took a B kingdom 1v1 and then we mocked them for winning. It's just embarrassing, to be completely frank. And I think old 307 and old 34 were kind of both joke kingdoms for that. But what I will say is, like, in your and Gaines' case, neither of you were like huge content creators when you first came in. I think you had like 1,000 subscribers. He had like 2,000. And it was kind of that brand was able to be helped. You know, you guys are able to get more viewers. But we also were able to put people out there who like were young, getting new exposure, and also kind of fed into that. Because again, you know it well enough. When you're the smaller guy, they like picking on you and Gaines. So you guys also added to that underdog mentality that, like, if we'd brought in a really big name streamer, then maybe that would have changed. But we brought in like smaller ones where it's like we got enough exposure, but we also got them trying to mock you guys. So that also like fed into 79.
Oh, totally. And they roast Gaines on a daily basis. Fortunately, people seem to think I'm somewhat interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Gaines is the troll. You're the well-liked member of it.
That's okay. It's a nice little balancing act. I'll take it. So long as we keep our content relatively separate, I think it works out.
Yeah. No, I think it has worked well. Like I said, I've enjoyed having you guys here for, you know, all the KVKs who've been here, and I think your channels have grown, and we've been able to like always get funny things. People will say, "Hey, did you see the video that Chapter Games put out?" And I'm like, "Nope, I don't really watch their videos half the time." And that's not a knock on you guys. I just don't watch like streamer videos.
No. You're not. It's all good. No, nothing wrong there. So I do have probably one more question. I know we're right about at time here. What are some new mechanics you'd like to see come to the game? Like, you mentioned that you're excited about some of the changes they've made with stratagems. I know we have Tides that we're in right now, which has been a pretty interesting KVK, I think. You know, what would you like to see them add?
Yeah, so I will say I love what they've been doing with KVK formats. Again, I don't think they get enough credit that they've been pumping those out at a crazy volume, where for a while all we had was Heroic Anthem and Strife of the Eight. So, you know, credit there. I don't really have a ton of complaints on KVK format per se. I will say I also like how ranged combat came in, and originally it was a bit of a joke when they had ranged points, which is just stupid. But now it is starting to become a viable thing. I mean, we even used it some in our altar recently. I'd like to see that continue being expanded on strategically, because I think if you use parts of the map correctly in XYZ, it really makes the war a little bit more dynamic. I think they've fixed their lag in a lot of regards, which is good, because it used to always be unplayable. What I would like to see kind of as a next step is any other like options they're able to throw into fighting. Because with two options, it's definitely better than one, you know, like you can range mode versus not. But it opens up possibilities for doing other things. Like maybe they have it where you're doing something like a tower in terms of your troop can't move, but it gets like better stats. So, you know, that would be used in those murder ball fights when everyone's doing the drag and drop and like you fortify the area or something. If they hit into your marches, you know, people up front are doing that. Would give you the possibility of making like a 3, you know, pronged attack. You have a front line of wall people. Your middle is all the normal ones who can move around, and your back are ranged troops. You know, it actually puts real tactics into the war. So I'd like to see it expanded on in that.
Yeah, that would be cool if they actually balance that out. Because I remember when they first introduced like the whole infantry, cavalry, archer thing, they haven't really done anything with it, which I feel like I was watching Napoleon recently. Great movie. I don't know if anyone's seen it. Traditionally, you have archers in the back, and then you have like the cavalry as the second row, and then the infantry go first. And I don't really think that we do that in Rise of Kingdoms, so having that sort of a mechanic would be really cool to have.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And that's kind of where I was coming up with, you know, that basic thought where if you can just put more and more mechanics in there, I think Rise of Kingdoms will be able to outlast a lot of other games. Because when Rise of Kingdoms first came out, there were some other games in the genre, but it was like not overly saturated. Now you basically pick whatever theme you want. There's probably a game that's like knockoff of Rise of Kingdoms, which was, knockoff of earlier games.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're able to use that massive amount of revenue they were able to obtain by like getting people to buy bundles nonstop and invest it into the game, I think they'll be able to prolong the game. And I think if they do that, it might start seeing an uptick again when a lot of these other ones kind of die off after their few month fad.
Yeah. I think that makes total sense. Well, Con, do you have any final words for us and for the stream?
I would just say I appreciate getting to come on here. Always happy to talk with you, talk with Games, any of the streamers. You guys help, publicity to 79. Appreciate that. And that's kind of my message. For those of you out there, if you hate 79, we appreciate you because guess what? You're the people we joke about in our announcements and we laugh when your kingdoms fail. If you're wanting to join a better kingdom than you're currently in and you're a useful fighter, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to have you in 79.
What a savage, Con. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully everyone who's watching has gotten to enjoy getting to know you just a little bit better. And thank you everyone for joining the stream. Once again, if you haven't already, do drop a subscribe and be sure to hit that like button. Helps me out and it does help grow the channel a fair bit. So I appreciate you all, and I think we're going to call the stream there.